Welcome back to the Call to Community series, The Life Jesus Wants for His People. We are in chapter 50, and it is titled Welcome as well, so a double dose of that.
Last one is entitled Hospitality.
Right.
This one is entitled Welcome.
So
what's the difference?
Let's talk about it. Yeah, so this chapter, it's kind of broken down into a couple different parts, a couple different thoughts. So first, the author talks about how do we welcome each other, and what does it mean to be a welcoming community? And then they talk about difficult situations, or also limitations and boundaries to that, and then also how to welcome marginalized people, and is that actually loving if you can't really create a space of healing and peace for them, and if they're coming for the wrong reasons. So I think that kind of kicks off a very interesting thought that I would love to get your feedback on, Rich, is how do you welcome people that maybe are not coming to the community for the right reasons, or should you welcome them?
Right.
When their motivations are just to assuage loneliness or deal or run away, retreat from life situations that they don't want to deal with.
Yeah, that is a really big question, because I think one can only speak generally here, but most people have a longing for community. Most people have a longing for a sense of togetherness and belonging. That's just a natural part of being a human being, that we want to be. That's why people who are in solitary confinement go crazy, because we need interaction, we need human relationship. Mm-hmm. However, that's not enough to live in community.
No.
And I think that's where we need to ask ourselves, why do we want to live in community? And I think the answer for those of us who've joined the Bruderhof is because we have to, because we must live in community, because we have no other choice, because that's what God has called us to. And we know in our hearts that this is something we will stick with regardless of what happens. And that's the commitment we make. That's the life commitment we make. And it's not for the sake of the good times. It's not for the sake of mutual friendships and feelings of affinity with our...
Or even family, I would say.
Yeah, definitely family. And we only have to look at the example of our Anabaptist forebears who ventured on this way of full community of goods in the face of terrific opposition, both internally and externally. Internally, there was a huge amount of strife as they tried to establish a right order. And then externally, obviously, in the Radical Reformation, there was violent persecution. And yet, these people continued to strive for this life together, as one of their writers wrote, to pluck the bloody rose which the faithful heart longs for. So here we get a picture of the church militant on earth with a mission, with a task that forgets about itself. And that's where, obviously, Doreen, the community remains open to everyone. And we want to be there for people to find healing, find forgiveness of sins, and care for those who have burdens to carry that we don't. But the core of the community needs to remain focused on this mission.
Yeah, and I would say, well, as it's pointed out in here, welcoming is not just something that happens when people cross a threshold or enter the community. It's an openness of heart, but that has to be coupled with discernment and wisdom from the church to know the limitations of that, and to also just stick to the core of Christ's commands to bring the kingdom here on earth and to live for that, and also to welcome different members and people traveling between the communities. I think that's really essential, and that can't be neglected because you want to welcome disenfranchised or other types of people. So it's definitely a balance and an attitude, and I think the fruits show, if it is the right openness and the right welcome.
You can be more focused on welcoming visitors than you are on caring for the brothers and sisters you've committed your life to. And that's obviously wrong. and in a way, as the author points out here, a kind of avoidance.
Yeah. I thought this was a really interesting way of putting it. The author says, if newcomers only want to change the community and get everything they can out of it without any modification on their part, there can be no true welcome. And I think we've seen that play out in our lives, and it's so true.
Actually, multiple times. I mean, you sometimes see this pattern of people who will come to the community, love the idea of it, completely overwhelmed for the first weeks, months, with delight at being part of this. And then as soon as the rough edges begin to show, they get disenfranchised, and they can't stick with it. And if there isn't the proper boundaries, if there isn't the proper parameters set for in what sense you're seeking community life, relationships can turn toxic pretty quick. And I think it needs to be clear from the outset that this is an extremely hard way. And although at this time in history where there's tremendous amount of religious toleration, which we're thankful for, and we're able to make our way economically and basically live as we want to live, that may not always be there.
Yeah.
And yet the only basis is for the community to last is if we're willing to go through good times and bad together, and to be willing to be faithful, stick with it. So,
amen to that.
How do you find out, though, as a person seeking community, if your commitment goes that deep?
I mean, I think it's just a loyalty to that commitment, and knowing that mistakes will be made, and that, an openness to correction, I would say, and willingness to have a dialogue about what that actually means. And I think it's a constant learning experience for all of us, and you're welcome to come join in with that if that's what you want to address in your life.
I mean, I think the answer is none of us really knows.
Yeah.
None of us really knows, but with prayer, I think the author again makes a good point in life in here that community is either progressing or it's regressing. We're as members of the community, we're either progressing and strengthening our faith commitments and deepening our lives, or we're regressing and becoming comfortable. And in that case, we'll probably not be able to stand the test. So, important challenge for all of us to stay challenged, to challenge one another to that deepening. And I guess with prayer and with going back always to the foundational moments of our lives, for us, baptism.
Yeah, and rediscovering the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding and actually gives us the answer we need.
That's right. Well, thanks for watching this week.
Good stuff in this chapter.
Very good. Thought-provoking. And we'll be back next week with chapter 51. See you then.